All right. Good morning. We are just on 11 o'clock, so we'll get into this. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name's Linden. I'm a former science teacher, and although our Year 7 resource here with Rollo didn't exist when I was teaching, I'm really enjoying getting out and sharing this resource with other science teachers like yourself and supporting them to use it effectively with their students. So yeah, thanks for joining us today. Really keen to help you have a look at our Year 7 science resource in a bit more depth and see how you can be best using it with your students so that, yeah, as it says there, we can be set up for success. So first thing I did want to just think about is, what does success actually look like? So what are those ingredients? And you can see them here on the screen. I think now understanding your students is absolutely key. Now, we at Rollo can't do too much to help you with that aspect, and that's why I know teachers are so indispensable. You know your students, you know their needs in the science classroom better than anyone else. And so as we move through our time today, really want to encourage you to keep them front and center in your mind. But what I can help you with is understanding your resource. So this Year 7 science resource you have and are using at the moment. So if you understand your resource really well, you know your students well, then this third element here on the screen becomes much easier to understand how the two can really interact together to get those best learning outcomes for your students. And so this is how we'll be structuring our time together this morning to be able to cover those ingredients for success, and those ones in particular that we can help you with. So we'll jump in and have a look at the resource. Firstly, we'll have a look at what's in the book and then what's in the online platform component. And so our textbook online resource, they're packed with a whole lot of features in here, and I'm aware of the limited time we have. You know, it's often a very busy sort of first few weeks of term and lots going on. So we'll focus on just a few of those features, those that will really help you get started with the resource or use it a bit more. But if you want to know more, please don't hesitate. You can use the chat box and reach out and ask any questions that you have as we're going through. And then lastly there, we're going to look at some of the different ways that we can incorporate this resource into the classroom. We'll give you some different starting points, different ideas than you might already be doing based on what we've heard from other teachers. So we've got around about 100 schools trialing the Year 7 science resource at the moment. So we're starting to hear lots of really great things from our schools. Now, many of the schools that are trialing Year 7 science may also be using our standard Year 11, 12 resource, what I'm calling sort of a Rollo 101, a sort of basic underlying sort of principles built into this platform. And so you may be familiar as one of our about 1,100 schools we have using Rollo resources across Australia. We've also been doing VCE textbooks for quite a number of years. And so these features that you're already aware of, we've built them into our Year 7 resource too, but also we've spoken with a whole lot of teachers and school leaders about the sort of trends and challenges that are happening in that junior science space and the kind of support that they and their students are after. And so we've really built the resource with this in mind. So before we do jump into that, though, I'd love to hear from you and maybe some of those challenges that you're finding in the Year 7 space. So I'm just going to share a poll with you here. And I'll just give you a moment. You should see it appearing up on your screen there. A moment to, you can choose as many responses as you like. So there's getting through all the content in the courses, developing student scientific skills, overcoming literacy challenges with scientific terminology, keeping students engaged in the classroom using formative assessment, and supporting students become independent learners. So I'm going to give you a moment. Choose which of those most pressing for you in your classroom at the moment in term 2. All right, so independence is one that's quite popular there. Also that using data to drive assessment and, using data from assessment to drive teaching, and yeah, scientific skills being another big one. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Let me just get that out of the way for me for the moment. All right, so you'll see here our Year 7 resource really aims to be that core place where you can come to help support the learning of your students. So you'll see there's a whole range of different aspects to our resource, and which we'll be running through. It's also really designed to help you get the fundamentals right in the early years of secondary school. We started in the Year 11, 12 space. We've moved to Year 7 so that we can get those fundamentals right and help students not only be better prepared for the challenges of science subjects coming in the senior years, but we want students just to be able to think scientifically about the issues around them, in the world around them. And so developing that real conceptual understanding, not just rote learning rules or processes, and really intentionally building those scientific literacy and inquiry skills is really crucial to achieving this. And so this is what the resource does, in my opinion, exceptionally well. So if you've got your hard copy textbook with you, if that's reached your school already, please pull that out. And as we go through the textbook sort of features and sort of structure, I'd love you to follow with us. You can also jump into your online Rollo account, and the PDFs in there as well. I'll quickly show you where that is if you haven't seen it yet. So if you're in your account, you'll see at the very top, there's the course materials, and you can download. We're going to be using book 1 as the example, but you can see book 2's up there as well. All right, so you'll see up here on the screen a bit of an overview of each part of the book, but we'll go into each of these in a bit more detail. I would really want to start though with the teacher slides, because that's often the place where teachers like to take and run with straight up and get a lot of value initially from the resource. So our teacher slides, these are accessible also in your Rollo account for each of the lessons. And they're also fully editable, right? I mean, you can download, you can adjust as you see fit. They're going to save you heaps of time having curriculum aligned slides that are ready to go. You can see the sound pedagogical principles there on the screen that they're backed by. And so let me just pull up an example of this. So next to, if we use say lesson 2A here, if you click on that attachment button, you'll see you can download as PowerPoint or Google Slides. I've opened them up here as Google Slides. And you can see through here, it starts off with the learning intentions and then jumps into each of these learning intentions following this sort of progression of having the prior knowledge, the theory, check for understanding, and the application. And these are designed so that you can use them and follow, and your students can follow along with you in class. So you'll see if there's any questions here or fill in the blanks. You can have these up and give students a chance to respond before then you go to the next slide and reveal the answers. You also see there's teacher notes in a lot of these. So this gives you some extra suggestions of what you can be doing alongside the slides too. And then at the end of each sort of learning intention, you'll see there's a chance to reflect, and students can evaluate whether they've met that success measure based on the learning intention. All right, I'll jump back here. So yeah, slides, great way to get in and start using that part of the resource. Now, we'll jump into the parts of the textbook, starting with the theory. So if you've got your textbook open there, maybe choose a particular chapter that you're up to. I've got 4A, chapter 4 is the example here. But you'll see the theory is really concise. It covers what students need to know. It's broken into learning intentions, as we saw followed through in the slides. And the design also allows that white space, not give students a sensory overload, which for Year 7 brains can be distracting. After the theory, we have the student version of the slides sitting in their books. So next to each slide, there's room for students to take notes. And this removes the need for students to copy notes out, and instead allows them to consolidate, summarize their learning. I know I found as a teacher, I'll be writing notes up on the board or showing them slides. And I had to really think about, what do I want them to copy down here, so they have a record of this in their own books. But having the slides here with space for students to take it really cuts down on that busy time where there's copying notes for the sake of it, and gets them actually processing, thinking, helping develop those note-taking skills, and being able to identify what are those key parts I need to note down for each question, and you are scaffolding them through that process. After the slides, which align with those teacher slides, we have the worksheet. And so this is a literacy worksheet, we call it. Its focus is really on the scientific terminology they've just learnt in the content. So we know, especially for Year 7 science students, that coming into the science classroom can often feel like they're learning a new language. They come across so many new words that have different scientific meanings than they do colloquially. And so getting a grasp of those key terms is really essential for them to communicate their understanding of the topic. So the worksheet's designed to be accessible for all students and really help the lesson move from that more teacher-led aspect to that more student-centered individual work phase of the lesson. And so help students scaffold them towards what's coming next and giving them that confidence to succeed as the challenge is increased. And so after we have this worksheet, then we've got the questions. So we have 3 different types of questions in the Rollo textbook, and they assess the understanding of the learning intentions, obviously, but it moves from that lower order thinking to higher order thinking as they progress through each section of the questions. So first of all, we have the science understanding questions, address the science content in the lesson, much more straightforward check that they're grasping those key ideas. We then have science inquiry skill questions, and they really focus on those transferable skills that are needed across all topics in science. And so whether that's identifying variables or interpreting graphs, problem solving, really focusing on those areas. And lastly, we have science as a human endeavour questions. And so these typically come in the form of an article or some sort of visual stimulus for students to help make a connection with what they've learned in the lesson to the real world. And it's more based around that sort of reading comprehension, giving students another opportunity to develop literacy skills in a scientific context. And I'll show you an example of that when I pull up the PDF in a second. But while we're talking about questions, I really wanted to mention the solutions as well. So you would really love this in our Year 11, 12 resources if you're familiar with them. But whenever we ask a question in our resources, we provide answers. And so if it's a written response, there's hints, checklists, example answers. On the online platform, there's video solutions, which helps students assess how they've gone and what they need to comprehensively answer the question. So I'll give you a second. If you've got your book in front of you, flick to the back of the book and you'll see the solutions sitting in there. These allow students to get that instant feedback, and hopefully means that when students get in the routine of doing this, they become more independent in their learning, or at the very least, they're coming to you with a more focused question around their understanding, not just a "I don't get it," which we know Year 7 students can often sort of rely much more on their teacher, and being able to develop that independence means they're coming to you with much more meaningful questions and being able to use your expertise much more effectively to support them. Now, lastly, but definitely not least important, are the pracs. Hands-on learning, so important in science. And so we've placed the pracs in book 1 after the first 4 chapters in a kind of prac book section. And you'll notice each of these prac lessons or practical investigations focus on science inquiry skills. And you'll see that in the purple box at the top. So there's explicitly focused skills for each of the pracs. And then the prac scaffold students through the steps, which will help them develop that skill throughout their investigation. Also mentioned here that all our pracs have risk assessments up on Risk Assess. So a lot of that admin work is done for you, where you can just quickly view those and use that as part of your preparation for those lessons. All right, before we have a look at that, I'm just going to quickly open up the PDF. So I've opened up here already, and just have a look at a couple of things here. So you'll see at the very start of the book, it runs through those sort of key features in the lesson. You've got the contents, of course, there as well. So you can always come back here and see how it's put together. If I jump to chapter 2, lesson 2A, you'll see again those learning intentions, the theory, those student notes, and the space for students to follow along with you and fill in the blanks and check how they're going, write down those questions, engage with what you're doing with them up on the board. We have the science literacy worksheet and the questions. Now, I said I'd show you the science of the human endeavouring questions. So this is an example, short amount of text, that visual sort of stimulus diagram, and students apply that knowledge and those literacy skills to be able to answer that on the topic they've just learnt about. And then, of course, the solution. So if we look here, say, where's our question? Sort of 6 back here about liquid nitrogen. Students are needed to compare 2 things to each other. And so in the solutions for question 6 here, you'll see they've got a hint, so they can use that to get unstuck. They've got an example answer, but then they've got this checklist, which helps them see what are the elements of my answer that should be my response. And so they can tick or cross those and sort of break down what bit was missing and what I could have added. The other thing I just wanted to mention here is the review question. So after each chapter, we've got this sort of topic test style activity that's differentiated into mild, medium, and spicy to extend and meet the needs of where those students are at. So that's another important way you can be helping students assess where they're at, and all of these, again, having those solutions to develop their understanding from it. Okay, I've been through a whole lot there. I'm going to pause for a moment and we're going to do another poll. So out of all these features, I'm keen to know, what do you think is going to be most helpful for you and your students in your classroom? So let me pull up this next question. So this should be appearing on your screen. I've just summarized some of those features there. So we've got the teacher slides, the student slides with space for notes, the concise written theory, the scientific literacy focus with the worksheets and science of the human endeavour questions, all with solutions, and also the pracs with investigation skill focuses. So I'm going to give you a moment. Again, you can select one or more of those that have stood out to you as we've been running through them. All right, so teacher slides seem to be quite popular there. Yeah, and having questions and solutions. Yeah, and I think, pracs, I really found as a teacher, you do a prac and you sort of almost have the skills as an afterthought, but having that at the very front and center of what am I trying to develop with my students is really popular, and that's great to see that coming through too. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts, everyone there. And there we go, literacy coming up there as well. Yeah, great. Let me get that out of the way. All right, so the last thing I want to run through with you before talking a bit about some examples we've seen of how teachers are using the resource, and also giving you some time for any questions that you have, is the online part of the resource. So you'll see here, I've shown you sort of the PDFs and we can get the slides and things, but students can also jump in and interact with the slides online. They're embedded into an Rollo lesson. They can record their answers. They can mark and work through those solutions, video solutions, that all come along with their textbook questions. And of course, as they engage with that, the data comes through for you. So you can track progress, engage student understanding, which can then, of course, inform your future teaching. So before we jump into the online component first, I just want to double check. To use the online, you have to activate your Rollo account. So the activation process, same as if you've got Rollo in year 11 and 12. You just need that link that's specific to your school. If you don't know what that is, if you haven't been sent that via your Rollo coordinator at the school, just let me know here in the chat box and I'll follow that up with you after the webinar. But you can either get students to go directly to that link, or if you head to the Rollo home pages and activate account button, the top right corner, you can click and then enter in that unique 6-digit code for your school. Because of course, if you're not in the online and activated, you're not going to get that full extent of the resource and be able to really thoroughly evaluate the trial at the end, having used both the textbook and online components. Okay, so let me jump into the online component here and we'll run through a few things. So you'll see here all those lessons down the page, just like our senior platform, you've got share links everywhere. And so being able to direct students to particular lessons, you can use that share link. The other thing I'm seeing quite useful for teachers is maybe they've got an activity they've been using previously. And so if we use this particle model example again, if I open up the lesson, maybe they've got a in-class demonstration that they often do to work through the theory of this. That's great. What you can also do is then still use, so maybe skip the theory parts and maybe come in here and go, I just want students to come in, check their understanding and do the application. So the check for understanding, if I go to that part of the slides, I can grab a link to chunk here and share that with my students. So when they click on that, it takes them straight to this part of the online lesson. So they can then move through and assess their understanding. They get that feedback as they go through to see did they get it correct or not, and can move through some parts of it independently. Jump back here. And of course, you can see the data as they engage with all of that in the class progress. We also see some teachers, back in the lesson here, using that bookmark chunk feature for students to take their notes here rather than in the book. So that's a possibility as well, but also hearing that a lot of teachers are appreciating students actually using a pen and writing their own notes and developing those skills too. And of course, we have at the very end of a lesson, the chance for that self-reflection. And so you to be getting that data coming through as to how they're understanding the lesson. All those different chunks can also be viewed in the all videos button at the top here. So you can see down here for that 2A question, 2A lesson, you can go to say check for understanding and get that link straight away from here rather than jumping into the lesson. Okay, if we go into say the question side of things, so I'm going to use 1C as an example here. So students can jump in. The sort of view that they would have is this here, where they can see all the questions. They can then go into each question. You get the data, but they'll see this, the question here, which they can answer, and then see the video solution and see either why they were correct or maybe why they were incorrect. And they've got the opportunity to reflect and say, do I understand it now or not? And so for you, you can then see, all right, how many got it right, but also then with that self-reflection, how many now understand it? So maybe they got it wrong, like this student. Now I've anonymized all these names here, which you can do as well over on the side if you're going to show this in front of your class. But you can see they got the question wrong, then they've watched the solution and said, now I understand it. And so if I jump back to this grid view, you can see some of this. So across your class, you can see which students have said. So the green means that they have said they understand it. That little red triangle in the corner means that they got it wrong initially, but now if it's green, they now understand it. So you might look down here and go, all right, a few students struggle with question 3 here, but the majority have now understood it afterwards, but there's still a couple that don't quite get it. So maybe I need to check in with these 2 students. Or you might look at, say, some of these written response questions and go, question 5, there's a whole bunch that are saying they don't understand it. So after they've done this in class or maybe at home for homework, you can then pull this up. You can, as a class, look at the question together, have a look at what the hint was, go through the checklist and see, all right, how did we go? What parts did we have? Look at the solution together. But you can also, of course, jump in and see, well, what did the students write in here? And also, what parts of the question did they struggle with? So you can see, again, all the student responses, what their reflection was, and across the class, which parts of that checklist did students say they had or not have? So a few more said they didn't identify that it affects precision. Right? So you can sort of see what do I need to focus in on, even within that particular question with the students. Right? So great chance for students to self-reflect, but all this data comes through for you, and you're able to use this formatively. to see where are students at, where do we need to focus our time as a class, or where are individual students at. So you can see there's a couple that are struggling more than others. And so maybe they need some targeted support. Okay, I'm going to jump back here. All right, so in our last few minutes here, we're going to chat a bit about how we're seeing teachers using these different parts of the resource. And so I know I've already shared a few things here, but a couple other things to mention. So with our teacher slides, as I said, this is often a place where teachers start to use the resource initially, because we know a lot of teachers do use slides already. And so having them here are good to go as is, being able to use straight away, of course, but we have made them editable so that you can alter them and adjust. You might want to choose just particular slides that you're using, and then other resources to cover other things. Or if you're wanting to cut down because there's so much in there, you can choose which bits to take out or only select certain check for understanding or application questions for students to run through as you do up on the screen. So yeah, the adaptability, we've had a lot of great feedback from teachers as to being able to use that flexibly in the classroom. The other big thing that we've seen from teachers is loving the questions, the solutions, and then the data that comes through. So of course, a bunch of teachers are sort of just grabbing our textbook and sort of replacing it with what they've been using before. And so maybe writing their answers in books or in the book, in the textbook, which is absolutely fine. And we want to encourage students, they've still got to write. We want those skills to be developing. And so that may be the case that you're keeping in the textbook first, but we've also seen a lot of value coming as teachers are getting their students to maybe write their answers in the textbook, but then use the online platform to input, whether it be multiple choice, their response there, and then self-reflect. Or if it's the written part, not to rewrite their responses online, but just do the marking, use the checklist, use the reflection. You've got video solutions there as that extra support as well if they've got the online platform open. And so that's allowing them to get that bit of extra support, but also that data coming through to you. So whether it's in class getting to do that or using the online stuff at home for homework so you can much more easily check progress and who's done what on the online platform, that data's being really beneficial for teachers to gauge student progress and track where it is across the class that they want to target their support based on that lesson. So I hope there's been a few things you've been able to take away from here and start to use in your classroom or think about using with your students. As I said at the very beginning, you know your students best, you know where they're at and what particular parts are going to work well with them. And so, yeah, I really hope today's been a helpful kickstart in using that with your students or using different parts of the resource with them and getting, more value, the most value you can from your Rollo Year 7 Science textbook online hybrid. So thank you very much for joining us. I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes if you want to either put questions through on the chat box or more than welcome, and I can turn you off mute and you can share that way. But really appreciate your time this morning, and please reach out if there's anything that comes up you'd like more support. All right, so I'll just hang around here if there's any questions. Otherwise, have a fantastic day. Thank you.